there's zero value in reading a book or zero value in going through an online course unless it's applied. My goal is not just to get you as a reader, but I want to make sure that you actually apply what I cover in the book. You can create these conversations at scale without you needing to do anything manual.
So Brennan is currently working on his first book. He's built courses, technology products, all manner of businesses. And what ties it together is that he is arguably one of the world's best at using email to its fullest. He's brought the idea of personalization, of customization, of understanding what subscribers want further than anyone, I would say. I'm so excited to be learning, Brennan, how you plan to apply this skill set to your book launch. Everyone knows that having an email platform, an author platform, a list is a good thing, but we wildly underuse them. The typical approach, I would say, is tell people once that you're writing a book, and then when it's finished, tell them that it's finished and hope they buy it. A slightly more sophisticated approach is along the way to give them updates about what you're thinking, doing. How are you going to apply it?
I'm working on a book on personalized marketing. And my fear going into this was that I would be able to launch a book and I'd have some modicum of success, but there wouldn't be any sort of ongoing momentum. The book is not meant to be ephemeral. It's not meant to be a flash in the pan about some hot topic that's going on at the moment. So one of my good friends, Josh Kaufman, he wrote a book called The Personal MBA. And years ago, we were in Philadelphia at a conference and we were just shooting the shit over a few beers. He was telling me that he was incentivizing people to get out of the book and onto his email list. Because what he said, most of his sales came from Amazon and Audible. But the thing is, he gets transactions from those platforms. He doesn't get customers. So if you get a sale on Amazon, you might get a bit of a royalty, but you don't get a personal connection. So he took the fact that he is the author, get his readers onto an email list as a way of offering a value add that you couldn't get otherwise. His argument was, somebody gets my book and they want to learn about personal finance. Early on in the book, he said something like, hey, if you email like book@joshkaufman.com with a photo, your receipt, and I will make sure that you get a bit more accountability than you would otherwise. Because let's face it, you bought a business book. Left to your own devices, it might just sit and accumulate dust on your bookshelf. I later learned that he basically just set up his thing with a platform called Zapier that said any email that hit the box would just be opted into his email list and gone through an onboarding sequence of emails. I'm seeing a lot more of this now as I read normal business books. I'm seeing additional, whether it be videos or resources or whatever. The author is trying to say, let's get you out of the book where you're an anonymous reader. I know that a sale occurred, but I know zero about you. And let's get you into a two-way relationship with me through an email list. So that's something I'm really trying to strategically think about as I write the book. So obviously my first priority at the moment is getting the manuscript done. But once it's getting to the point where I'm getting close to that, which I'm hoping will be by the end of the year, I'm going to start thinking about how can I create as many things as possible in the book that get people out of the page. So Josh had that at the end of every chapter of the Personal MBA. There was a link to a dedicated page on a site that had like resources, whether it be TED Talk videos or related to things covered in that chapter, almost like footnotes, right? And there would always be opt-ins and such on those pages. So I'm not at the point yet where I've figured out exactly how I plan on doing it with the book I'm working on, but I have seen it work well, because whether you're an author who is using the book as a method of generating leads, like coaching, online courses, or whatever else, or just a way to say, hey, I want to be able to make it so when I have a new book come out or something else that I think could benefit you in the future, I want to be able to reach out to you and not depend on Amazon to randomly send you an email saying, this person you bought from years ago has something new out. You can't control that, but you can control that direct audience relationship that you get with an email list.
I love in the examples you mentioned, it has to be a complementary piece of value that readers actually want. It feels like it brings them closer to the reason they picked up the book. And Personal MBA nailed it. You're trying to build a habit, you want accountability. You're trying to learn these things, you want accountability. Accountability seems really powerful. And I've seen some giving away something that's not desirable. And so it doesn't have the effect that the author wanted.
Yeah. I've seen it where the default is just go here and join my newsletter, but who wants to join a newsletter, honestly? So yeah, I've done this with my courses, and this has worked really well, is the fact that if you can point out that there's zero value in reading a book or zero value in going through an online course unless it's applied. And most people's natural inclination is to maybe consume some content, but say, that was interesting, I should do that, but to normal. So if you as the author can say, my goal is not just to get you as a reader, but I want to make sure that you actually apply what I cover in the book. So if you go here, what I will do is I will put you on what I call the virtual course club or a virtual book club. I think there's just a lot of room for us as the creators, the authors, to say, if we can send a timed series of emails that walk through chapter by chapter the content of what they've hopefully consumed at this point, and use this as a way to check in, maybe a 3-month drip of additional resources, additional inspiration, ideas, just, hey, it's been a month since you started reading the book. Hopefully you finished it by now. How are you doing? When you think of buying a book, I'm not going to buy a Stephen King book and expect to hear from Stephen King, but you can actually put your name on an automated email. Replies go directly to your inbox. You can build in these feedback loops between you and your audience. When somebody joins a course, I find out what was it that made them decide to move forward? Why did they decide to join? Take action. And if I could capture that then, because if you ask somebody that a month later, the responses you get probably won't be fully accurate. But if you ask them immediately after purchase, it's going to be more accurate. So you get some responses that way. And then maybe a few weeks later, a few months later, depending on how long it takes to apply some of your stuff, you can have a basic check-in and say, hey, I'm not looking for success stories just yet. It's too early, but I'm always trying to see, are you a work in progress? Are you doing something as a result of what I've written? If so, I'd love to hear, what are you working on? You get a bit more of this work in progress, future case study data at that point. And then later on, maybe 6 months down the road, you just say, hey, it's been 6 months. How are things? Have you shipped your book yet? Maybe you found out they were almost done. So have you shipped it? What kind of responses are you getting? And so on and so forth. It's just a great way where you can create these conversations at scale without you needing to do anything manual, if that makes sense, right? You get people naturally and organically responding to these emails and saying, hey, Rob, thanks for following up with me. Here's what I'm working on, blah, blah, blah. And that's just so valuable for finding out, what are people actually doing? Are there any bugs being uncovered from the responses I'm getting where people are confused by this chapter, or maybe they're struggling with this part of what I taught? Anyway, I just love that kind of stuff, because my creation strategy has always been keep my ear to the ground and listen to what people are telling me. And if I can create these pseudo focus group type things in a way that is set it up once and it just continuously provides customer raw feedback, that's the kind of stuff that I find to be so incredibly valuable. You could do all that with email by getting readers out of the book and onto a email list.
I love it. And I love the empathy at the second stage of that. Everyone, like, the idea of a lead magnet is pretty common. It's like, get their email. But then I see authors, myself included, we struggle with what to do next, because we're like, they already bought my book. I don't want to sell them more stuff. Whereas what you're describing is almost falling into the role of the empathetic coach, where you're saying, you trusted me to guide you to this piece of knowledge or through this process. How's it going? Are you stuck? Let me help you out. And then you're building this deep relationship. You're unlocking evangelism. You're going to get your case studies, and it's setting up whatever you want to do next.
Like you said, get testimonials, case studies, which can be used to help further the book. It's a win-win for everyone, because for them, it's a way to hopefully get them thinking it's not just a book that I've completed. Now there's this cadenced check-in going on. It's kind of virtual coaching in a way, even though it's done kind of at scale. Back when I used to do more consulting work, I had a little agency in Southeast Virginia, and one of our clients was a big real estate company. They had us build an app that said, when we have a client of ours who closes on a house, we're going to type in their information, so name, phone number, and closing date, into a form, click a button, and that will generate a ICS calendar file that the agent who helped them gets loaded on their phone, and it will pre-populate things like 2 weeks later, call and ask how they've moved in so far. How is it living in the new house? 2 months later, how have you met the neighbors yet? What are they like? Blah, blah, blah. 6 months later, any issues with the house? 1 year later, congratulations, you've been there a year. And it's this kind of like mindless follow-up where they'd actually get a phone call. It wasn't just a automated email or anything. It was high touch. But what was interesting was the reason they did this was they knew that statistically speaking, within 5 years, most homeowners will sell their house after they bought a house. They'd all get hopefully their business when it comes time to sell the house.
You were talking about using email as a way to develop the relationship and extend the relationship and deliver more value to people after they've chosen to buy the book. Treating the book as the entry point to that relationship. Is that the way you think about it? Or is there also an important part that happens pre-purchase?
The initial batch of people who I hope to buy the book are going to be people who are already on my email list. So I can't treat them as somebody new. I can't expect them to be somebody new. What I plan on doing is I track when they're on my site, what kind of content they're reading and what they've read and haven't read. So one of my plans would be to make it so when they do buy the book, I'm going to systematically drip out like an Evergreen newsletter that will follow up with them on a weekly basis with content that I think should be helpful to them. Because at the end of the day, the recipient doesn't know or care about the date the content was written, as long as it's helpful to them and as long as it gives them something of value when they receive it. So one of the things with Create and Sell, which is kind of the brand that the book's going to be under, because right now, if you join the email list, you're just thrown headfirst in the stream. Whatever I send out that week is what you get, which might not make sense, especially if what I'm sending is a follow-up to something else I sent, a few weeks before that. So a lot of us use an email newsletters like this continuous weekly story that we're developing, but it's hard to jump into that midway through. So somebody enters my database through the book purchase. Maybe I'm doing a partnership webinar with somebody and the book is pitched at the end and I get a bunch of people who then buy the book. But now through that, they're also then getting onto my list. How do I want to onboard them differently than somebody who comes through a free article that's on my site? If they come in through the book, the relationship is already a bit more committed in the sense that they paid something at that point. I'm going to treat them differently with onboarding. It's not going to be as focused on the establishing trust element of things. They've purchased from me already. Much of that trust is probably already established. So we can then focus on other stuff, namely the polyfilling in content and messages and articles and stuff that I think could be helpful to them.
For your tool stack, you like ConvertKit for email. Mm-hmm. For capturing people's details on your site, you use WriteMessage, which you built yourself. You're one of the founders of that. Is there any other crucial tools that are kind of part of your email stack?
I've had good luck lately with Sparkloop, which is a newsletter referral platform. At the bottom of my emails, I have a little graphical thing, which I get about 15% of all growth through referrals through Sparkloop. So pretty integral at this point.
How do we keep these emails out of the spam folder so they do in fact land in the e-box and they do get read?
So I found the best way is replies. Typically speaking, the way that Gmail and other ISP or email providers look at a sender as being real or not is, are these emails engaged with in the sense that they're replied to? So if you can build in feedback loops into your emails that are either getting people who just joined your list to reply and tell you a bit about why they joined, what they're looking to achieve, what they're currently struggling with when it comes to, say, shipping a book. And maybe you send out an email newsletter. And in that, at the bottom, you're asking somebody to reply and tell you a bit about, has this affected them, so on and so forth. Most of the emails I send have some call to action included. That is a reply and it gets taken up on. My current open rates now are a bit dubious due to iOS 15, but pre-iOS 15, usually my open rates are 55 to 60%, which is fairly high. That's because by seamlessly making it so it's not just an automated email from Brennan, but instead it's an email from Brennan that is asking to be replied to, that tends to send a pretty strong signal to the ISPs and the email providers that this account is not just an automated transactional email.
I think it's worth mentioning, I'm a subscriber to some of Brennan's Create and Sell list. And after receiving about 3 emails from him, I started swiping my credit card and frantically buying things because it was just irresistible. And it feels like there's a whole stack of authenticity to his emails. It's quite interesting where it's a casual tone. They're very empathetic and high value to the receiver. At a certain point, I did reply, but to be honest, I didn't expect anything back because every email newsletter is like, let me know if you have questions. I read every reply, but then they never do anything else. And so I sent a reply and it's boom, there's something back. And it feels like with that whole stack in place, it becomes so much more powerful. And then I guess that creates the virtuous cycle that Brennan's talking about that the email providers pay attention to.
So I was wondering how you think about the paywall line for your content of what's available on your blog in public versus just in the emails or just in the book.
It's a good question. The way I typically look at things is, in a perfect world, the distinction would be around the difference of do-it-yourself and done with you. DIY would be my articles, my free content would be, here's the framework explained, here's my recommendations, but go out on your own and hopefully don't scrape your knees too hard in the process. Whereas the distinction between paid would be something where I'm personally involved somehow in helping them. So maybe there's a community group of customers and I have a course, Mastering ConvertKit, that's in depth. And the community is very tight and constant. And I'm the main contributor and replying to people's posts. So there's that degree of access that you don't get through just the free thing. Now, granted, I just said you can reply to my free stuff and I encourage it and I do reply back. The paid stuff should be more turnkey in the sense that it's packaged information that's easy to follow, easy to implement. One of my products is a email template builder. It's software effectively. With the information products, I try to include whether it be content templates or checklists. I have a course in pricing that I did a while back that has a lot of in-depth interviews included in it, along with copy and pastable kind of scripts that people can use. The job of the free stuff is to create the customer, to establish the need. So that's what I'm doing, the create and sell. I'm trying to establish that an email personalization done right is really good for your business. And here's why. And then the paid upsell, if you will, is once that problem has been established and they trust that it actually is an issue, I have a very in-depth program that can help them really understand how to implement much of what I'm talking about in the free stuff. So I do try to give away as much as possible in terms of not just giving sizzle away, but substance, where my free emails do tend to be somewhat technical and somewhat involved. But I did an email the other day on time zones in ConvertKit that was very high level, but it wasn't prescriptive. It wasn't in depth in that sense. But then today I just released for the course a 40-minute video tutorial on how to execute everything I just talked about in that free email.
Will you talk a little bit about pricing? Because as far as I know, you have content that ranges from free up to several $1,000s. At every tier, there's massive value. How does that work? Are they standalone? Is it a flow? How does this work for you?
Yeah, let me talk specifically about create and sell, because I have another company that I'm not as involved with these days, Double Your Freelancing, which had more of a proper product ladder where I'd have entry-level product at about $249 that usually was discounted depending on how you got access to it. And then it went up to $1,000.
Can I just say that I'm extremely envious, because if you try to sell a book for more than about $20, you get yelled at.
Yeah, I know. The issue is, so when I originally did Double Your Freelancing Rate, back in 2012, it was a book. It was a $49 ebook PDF. The sad reality, which was initially hard to accept, but strategically smart, was that you can tack another figure onto a price and rebrand it as a course. Your book, Rob, Useful Books. You could literally read the book into a camera and add a zero to the end of the price. It's the medium, right? Even though the book is just as valuable as you reading into a camera, the contents of the book, people associate courses as being more high value. To go back to the bigger question, with Mastering ConvertKit, that course is 22 hours of video, and it's very in depth in the sense that even though there's a guided track that most people go down that applies to 90% of people who buy the course, there's a lot of content, 22 hours worth of in-depth, over-the-shoulder video tutorials of how to do random stuff, whether it be sending SMSs through ConvertKit, which a lot of people didn't know you could do, or doing things like sending emails based on subscribers' time zones. And the reason it's $1,000 is because it's not an entry-level course. So I've intentionally made that expensive, and the customers I get are more serious. They're not hobbyists. They're doing it for their business. It's resulted in a higher quality customers. Now, the downside, it's a bit of a jump to go from 0 to 1,000. And I think that's the big issue. So how I'm planning on solving in my own way is the book will help, because obviously what you want to is, if somebody says I spent $20 in a book by Brennan and what I got out of that was so much more than that $20 invested. More recently, I'm creating a lot of smaller courses that are more theory, not technical, on things like, can creators do Black Friday, Cyber Monday deals? And so how? Or I'm doing a mini course on testimonial gathering. So how do you automate the collection of testimonials, what I talked about earlier? These are $79 courses that are meant to be effectively impulse buys for businesses. Because if you're a business owner and you need to consider and weigh a $1,000 purchase, yes. Do you need to do the same for an $80 purchase? Probably not as much. But if I can get somebody who buys that and gets a lot of value out of it, the likelihood that then they'll think, I've applied what I've learned here, and now I want to go even further and really take my email marketing to the next level, the likelihood that that happens goes up, right? So that's what I experienced with Double Your Freelancing by having that ladder. And now I'm trying to backfill in these other lower priced tiers, if you will, at Create and Sell.
First off, this has been just tremendous. On the West Coast, I always have to get up a little bit earlier than I want. This one's just knocking it out of the park in terms of conceptual value that I think I can do something really, really powerful with. But how do you prioritize what to respond to in terms of the feedback that's coming to you and how much time to invest in responses?
So one of the things I think a lot of us struggle with is content. What I've tried to do is, if it's just a very simple thing that is a 1-minute read and reply, then I'll just do that then and there. But then Rob wrote in with a 4 or 5 paragraph question. And I think I replied to you, Rob, saying, hey, would you mind if I reply in public? That's what I like to do. If somebody comes in with a really great question, I can't justify spending an hour replying. If that become public domain, I can reply, and now my entire list can benefit from the response. And it can be there now published on my site, where now I get future people who can then benefit from that response. Obviously, you get permission. Also, when somebody joins my list, I ask them to fill out a quick form. And one of the questions is, if I could dedicate the next newsletter to helping you solve something that you're struggling with, what would that article be about? I get a lot of really good comments. These organic replies to emails are where, to be honest, the majority of my emails come from.
I've been using a similar approach with video, just doing video replies, because right now I feel like writing's my job. So I want to do something different,
There is something to be said about making it very exclusive, where you need to actually have the book. You can't just go to bookdomain.com and get it there, because then anyone could do it. I'm just trying to think of the risk of putting friction up front. Would that leave you with a higher quality, but maybe a lower volume of people?
One thing that Nirayal mentioned with his book, he did a 50-page workbook to go along with Indistractable, and he used that as his digital lead magnet and newsletter sign up. He actually engineered it so the promotion worked in both directions. So half of the workbook was excerpts from the book. And he felt like if someone started with the workbook, they would be highly tempted to go buy the book. And if they started with the book, they'd be highly tempted to go download the workbook.
If somebody did end up in that sequence or whatnot, somehow pre-buying the book, maybe they discovered it somehow or a friend linked them to it. The worst that happens is they end up eating into your allowance of contacts and you pay the 0.001 cents a month for them. But the upside is they end up as a customer and they love what they're getting over email, and now they need to just buy the book associated with it. Let me close with something that I think is one of the central things I'm trying to explore in the book. I got my start business-wise running an agency, where if I was talking to you and trying to get you to hire us, I would take into account your demeanor. I would take into account any back information I knew about you, British parents from Florida. I would synthesize all of that to think, how do I best explain to Rob why we're right for him? So what I would encourage everyone to do is to take that to heart and think, how can I surface either behavioral cues or specific, discrete things about the people on my list? So I have more than just a name, more than just an email address. So I know what stage of the book writing process somebody is at. What kind of book are they planning on writing? What is their number one doubt? And then how can I use that not only at a high level to understand the composition of my audience, but more importantly, is there a way that if Brennan's getting an email from me, I can massage the stock message that he would be getting in a way, maybe by dropping a specific example or by using a bit of language that would resonate more with him, that would make him think that this email is exactly for him. And so what I'm getting at is trying to find that middle ground between high touch, but low volume and very live. Like, I'm talking to you over Zoom. I'm reading your body language. I know certain things about you. Kind of stuff we all do in person when trying to get somebody to see our way or get somebody to buy from us or whatever else, versus one size fits all, very high volume, infinitely scalable. So if you can think about how you find that middle ground, that should be the thing that we're all trying to achieve. Because if we can do that, we increase the relatability of what it is we have to offer with the specific reason that the people in our audience, the individuals in our audience, need what we have.
I feel like you just boiled all of business down into an empathy structure that it resonates so much with me. So grateful that you were here to share it. Where can we follow to learn more about what you're writing, what you're thinking, what you're creating?
Yeah, best place would be createandsell.co. I'm on Twitter, and that's just Brennan Dunn.
I would highly recommend that everyone hops on the Create and Sell mailing list. It's been huge for me, both in terms of the content, and it's also inspiring because it sets a bar of what to aim for. So Brennan, thank you so much. You're a hero. I really appreciate it. It was great to catch up. It's been a blast. Do I remember correctly that as a teenager, you used to head off into international waters on a boat so that you could gamble? Is that a true story or is that a myth?
I had to be over 18. I went to Florida State for a year when we just weren't into college American football at all. So we found that there was this free casino cruise that left out of Jacksonville. We built a craps table in the dorm room and tried to get it so dice would be thrown on a single axis, which apparently, according to a book we read, would give us a substantial advantage over the house. We would practice during the week, and then on weekends, especially on football weekends, go to Jacksonville 3 hours each way to throw dice at a craps table.
Did the one axis theory work?
No.
That was information sold. I bet a casino wrote that book.
Probably.
19-year-old enthusiasm and 19-year-old wisdom. There's a certain magic in it.
Because obviously what you want is somebody says, I spent $20 on a book by Brennan, and what I got out of that was so much more than that $20